We have a shortage of what they call PPE, the personal protection equipment. So where's that shit in this bill?
March 28th, 2020, episode 6, season 2 of the Barney and Clyde podcast. This is a special pandemic lockdown edition. There's only one of us at the libation station. We're practicing responsible social distancing. I am here at the libation station. Clyde is over at his domicile.
Yes, I'm at libation station, the remote 2.0 libation station.
Yeah, and we hope everybody's having a fine Saturday. We gave a little thought to how to do this in the most viewer-friendly way, and hope we've come up with something you're going to enjoy. Got a nice lineup for you today. Under caring versus grandstanding, we're going to talk about 3 diatribes on the, 2 on the Senate floor, or no, 2 on the House floor and 1 on the Senate floor. Bernie Sanders, Thomas Massie, and Sandy from Westchester, a.k.a. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Someday maybe we'll try a free market. We're going to talk about the disgusting amount of pork in the bill that Congress finally hammered out. And then meanwhile, back in Athens, we're going to talk about how the situation is shaping up here at home and our local school corporation. And Clyde came up with this. He's the parent of us, so he's got more firsthand knowledge. The utter failure in e-learning, but maybe a chance to try out the success of homeschooling. And then there's an overarching theme that'll no doubt show up in all of these, and I hope there's time at the end where we can kind of make a segment, or at least draw this together in a conclusion. How is all this, for instance, the social distancing that we're practicing right now, all of it, how is it going to, and all the bailout that's, every aspect of this, how's it going to, in the long term, affect the relationship between the state and the individual?
Right.
Which is something that Clyde and I both think about a lot. And you explain why we think about we have in common. Clyde's the Libertarian, I'm the conservative, and but there's a lot of Venn diagram overlap. Tell them a little about that.
Right.
Clyde.
Well, I think anyone who's seen this podcast in the past knows that that both of us hold the highest esteem for human freedom, and find that it's the cornerstone for laying our modern foundation, or the foundation of our modern society, and that society prospers when the individual is free to choose as he or she would choose to do so for him or herself. Mm-hmm. Right, and I think that's where our Venn diagram has its heaviest overlap. You being a conservative and me being a libertarian, is that we believe that people should be free to do as they please, whenever they please it, so long as they're not hurting anyone else or interfering with commons type issues. Yeah,
we usually, since we're both here at the libation station, generally, if it's the middle of the day, Clyde's got a nice kind of routine worked out where he stops by some given establishment where and picks us up something intriguing. He seems to have a real eye for tropical flavored waters and things like that, and he's always making new discoveries or interesting kind of root beerish type beverages. If it's a little closer to evening, where we can legitimately claim it's cocktail hour, sometimes we have like a Kentucky bourbon Manhattan or a vodka tonic or something. What are you drinking today over at your place?
I'm just having some coffee. I'm having a Nespresso Caramelito with a little bit of hazelnut decaf mixed in for a half calf. It's quite nice. But it's not very exciting. It's sort of the daily blend around here. Yeah. So we've got a quarantine, prepper pantry stack full of Nespresso pods. So we've been going through them pretty fast.
I'm pretty boring today. I'm just doing water.
Yeah. Well, I think water is very bracing sometimes.
Yeah, I'm a big water fan. Sometimes it's just the ticket. Well, let's go ahead and segment 1. Caring versus grandstanding. Sometimes to the untrained eye, they can look a lot alike, but if you or the untrained knows, but once you've kind of been able to detect the grandstanding odor, you can tell the difference. I know we're going to mainly focus on Thomas Massie and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but why don't we say a word about Bernie? He apparently went into a diatribe on the Senate floor, did he not?
Yeah, so Bernie, I just continually have to reiterate my deep and sincere loathing for Bernie Sanders. I understand why people do like him. He feels on the surface, and I think a lot of people got introduced to Bernie Sanders in 2016, right? I don't think a lot of people knew his name. I barely knew of him before 2016.
Yeah.
And I just find him to be so completely disingenuous. He is a constant apologist for authoritarianism on the left. He's a constant apologist for the Democrats bailing out corporations and funneling money from the lowest common denominator up to the highest elite. So he's a total and complete hypocrite. And it makes my stomach churn that he's
got 5 mansions too.
That he's so wildly rich, for one. That he's so wildly rich off the public teat. He's never had a real friggin' job in his whole life, and that he's lecturing people about the working class. Like, this man is not the working class. This man is one of the elites, and he sort of represents what socialism eventually is destined to become. It's that person championing the elites, or championing the people in order to funnel money up into the elites, AKA himself. And
apropos of his background, what you were saying, you're probably aware he got kicked off a hippie commune in 1971 when he was a very young man for not pitching in and helping.
Right, which is funny because in the commune setting, I think that the commune, this may be a rabbit hole, but the commune thing is sort of like perfectly fits within a libertarian society as long as everyone's in agreement about what they're going to do. Well, they weren't all in agreement about what they were going to do because apparently Bernie Sanders was going to signed up to sit on his ass and spout commie manifesto crap all day while other people were working on the frickin' farm.
Bringing in the vegetables and all that good stuff.
And probably the pot. But they kicked him out.
Right, exactly.
Because he's not working class. He wasn't going to spike a shovel into the ground.
Exactly. And of course, the places he's chosen to visit, the foreign countries he's chosen to visit and sing the praises of over the years, Cuba, Nicaragua, the Soviet Union, Venezuela. He's a hypocrite, but the talk that he talks, at least on a theoretical level, the countries that he chooses to adore and are pretty scary. Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that he's popular because the I'm going to give you free stuff approach is never going to get stale. No, people aren't going to get sick of that. They're never going to get wise. There's always a fresh crop of suckers coming in to sell that to.
Yeah, but apparently he went on a rant since the coronavirus outbreak has happened.
Yeah, so let's listen to his rant. And here's another thing about Bernie is that I don't think he's always wrong. I actually agree with Bernie on a lot of things, foreign policy, at least some of the things he says about foreign policy, not necessarily what he does.
Which falls outside our Venn diagram a lot of the time, But anyway,
let's listen to Bernie go on. And here's the thing, he goes on a rail against the Republican side, okay? Now, bear in mind that this man claims to be an independent in the Senate. He's won his seat as an independent. So he's never going to call out Democrats, ever. He calls out only Republicans, and you get a sense of what side he's on. And let me preface this a little bit more because this came as Senator Lindsey Graham. I like to say Lindsey because that's how Senator Graham pronounces his own name. But Lindsey Graham said that the way that the bill was written, the relief for people was going to be disincentivizing work because they were going to get more money under the plan than they would have gotten under their previous benefits, their unemployment benefits. And And I think that he's not wrong about that. I disagree with Senator Graham an awful lot. I think he's a war hawk. I think he's a pretty disgusting human being, but he's not wrong about that. You give people more money to not work than money to work, and that's the supply and demand is going to dictate that. Why would they choose anything else? So anyway, here's Sanders going off about it.
This bill does, which is right, is it says, okay, we are in the midst of a horrific crisis, unprecedented in modern American history. So not only are you going to get your regular unemployment benefits, we're going to add another $600 a week to it. And now I find that some of my Republican colleagues are very distressed. They're very upset that somebody who's making $10, $12 an hour might end up with a paycheck for 4 months more than they received last week. Oh my God, the universe is collapsing. Imagine that. Somebody who's making $12 an hour, now like the rest of us, faces an unprecedented economic crisis with the $600 on top of their regular unemployment check, might be making a few bucks more for 4 months. Oh my word! Will the universe survive? How absurd and wrong is that? What kind of value system is that? Meanwhile, these very same folks had no problem a couple of years ago voting for $1 trillion in tax breaks for billionaires and large profitable corporations. Not a problem.
I don't think Sanders is wrong about that last little bit there.
Well, let's explore this, my libertarian friend, because I've seen you nod your head in agreement when I make the assertion that a person's money or an organization, and corporations are a type of organization, a person or an organization, the money of a person or an organization is that person's or organization's.
Right, yes. I agree.
It belongs to them. It's their property. And it matters not whether that person or that organization is poor, middle class, or rich. That's beside the point as to whether government has any right to take it. Government ought to have to puke all over itself to justify taking the first red cent of it. Yeah. And it damn well better be for a constitutionally specified function. I mean, right. Are you not in agreement with me?
No,
I
agree with you on that. The whole preamble that Sanders sets up is he says, well, oh my gosh, people might make a little bit more. You're against poor people making more and becoming not poor. And I think that's really, again, we talked about how disingenuous this guy is. That's completely the opposite of what Senator Graham and his colleagues are saying. They're saying that you're already paying people to not work. Now you want to pay them more to not work. So so if the money that they had before to not work was substantial enough to keep them not working, why give them more? It doesn't make any sense, especially when there actually is no money. Right, the United States. All this is
being done with pretend money, given our debt and deficit.
It's pretend money.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It's like, okay, so you're going to give somebody $600 extra again to not work, and fine, whatever benefits, cool. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but it's just like that. The money isn't there, and the money has to come from somewhere. No one's going to lend to us at this point. We're a toxic asset. Our bonds aren't going to be any good. The money's not coming from there. The only way to make this money happen is to inflate the currency, just to make this money out of thin air. And then we're going to pay for that, Barney. And like, I don't mind chipping in to help my fellows, but what they're going to do is they're going to devalue the amount of money that I have. They're going to devalue the amount of money that you have. They're going to suck your retirement away. And, we're going to be paying interest on this debt. Yeah. Whatever check we get is just going to offset the economic impact of, one, the risk to my job or yours, and the amount of money that I'm going to lose in more taxes, down the road and my money being devalued.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and would this make a good segue into the next Capitol Hill rant that, or grandstanding or whatever that?
Yes.
Thomas Massie, who's a Republican from Kentucky, a House member, and this is one of those interesting things, and I think we're going to have this is going to come up when we talk about AOC as well. There are two ways to look at it. One is look, this is an emergency if there ever was one, and we got to pass a nice clean bill, which they didn't, of course, but we got the cleanest bill possible to get money, cash money into the hands of people and organizations that are in dire need. Okay. The other side of the and he at the last minute is holding up and say, wait, we got to have a recorded vote here, which is going to require a bunch of legislators to come back to Washington at a time when we're talking about social distancing, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, you're pulling this stunt at the last minute. The other side of the coin is he's saying, wait a minute, for the reasons you're talking about. Wait a minute here, are we? There's some things in here that make me really uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah, I'm a huge Thomas Massie fan.
Okay.
And I like this guy very much, and I think he's right about this. But I think what he was trying to say was, well, let's just listen to him say it.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Speaker, I came here to make sure our republic doesn't die by unanimous consent in an empty chamber, and I request a recorded vote.
A quorum is present. The motion is adopted.
They were trying to say that they're trying to keep the vote secret, basically, that they don't want to be on record having supported this.
Yeah.
So the claim is they're trying to figure out how to get it passed without making the legislators show up in person to vote, right? So they decide on this thing called a voice vote. I'm really not sure the precedent for that, how often that actually happens. But the way it would, I've never heard of it before, but the way it would go is that they would give their consent for the bill to be passed in advance. They don't have to come into the chamber to vote, and apparently they can only do this if there's unanimous consent amongst the House members for them to do that. And somehow or another, because there's no official vote on the floor, their names don't get attached to having voted for this thing. So when you look up their public record, you wouldn't see whether they supported it or not. I don't know if it has an NA or if it just doesn't appear or what happens, but that's Massie's argument. So if Massie or anyone else were to dissent and say, no, we have to call this to a vote, then that goes to a quorum, and they have to pull in no fewer than 200 representatives to come in and vote on the thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that said, there is one more clip from Massie here.
Okay.
So C-SPAN catches him outside of Capitol Hill, and a group of reporters. So there's like 5 people tackling him to answer questions. So let's listen to that.
Give them any of your time? Why wouldn't they give you a time on the floor, sir? Congressman, both sides of the chamber didn't see to let you do this recorded vote.
Well, they didn't even give me a minute to speak in a 4-hour debate. There's a big cover-up in there.
You believe it's a cover-up, sir?
Well, they're trying to cover up their votes. They had enough people there to pass the bill, but they still refused to have a recorded vote. And they told me they were trying to protect members.
Don't you believe that that's the case, sir? It's 435 members in a room that can't hold that many.
No. They're trying to protect the members who are there from political ramifications.
Sir, both sides of the chamber, your side as well as the Democrats, as well as the White House, have said that they didn't want you to do this. Why press forward into the bill that everybody agrees should be passed?
Like I said in there, I came here this week to make sure our republic doesn't die in an empty chamber by unanimous consent. These people need to do their jobs. If they're telling people to drive a truck, if they're telling people to bag groceries and grow their food, then by golly, they can be in there and they can vote. And that's what we did this week. They came, and you can see it didn't delay the vote any. They sat on their cans yesterday here. They didn't do a thing yesterday. They were trying to say this would delay it to have a recorded vote. The truth, if you're willing to report it, is they don't want a recorded vote. They don't want to be on record of making the biggest mistake in history.
Congressman Massie, a third-rate grandstander.
I'm at least second rate.
Congressman Massie, nicely done.
Did you catch that? So
Yeah.
So
on principle, I'm on his side. I admire his fealty to principle, and it's my principle. It's your, people who love freedom and constitutionally specified procedure for doing this kind of thing.
So
as a matter of fact, the only argument the other way is that the clock was ticking and people are in dire need out there. And
right, but that's the thing. He's saying the clock is ticking and people are in dire need out there. It's not actually going to delay the process any. The process is already shooting itself in the foot, and the process that our entire republic is built upon is this process, and we have to follow this process. We have to do this. We're not going to. We cannot set the precedent that in just because of urgency, that we have to abandon our principles, we have to abandon everything that made this country. That's why our country is getting in trouble in a lot of respects. That's why freedoms are deteriorating, is because, well, it's an emergency again, so we have to disband these certain freedoms.
And we're gonna, like I say, I want to make sure that we tie all this together, because this is an overarching theme that's gonna come up in all three of our segments, and I want to make sure there's time at the end to tie it all together under that. What are the long-term implications for the relationship between the state and the individual?
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, shall we go ahead and talk a little about AOC and her rant?
Yeah, well, I just want to point out that
sure.
She said the president called you a third-rate grandstander. So Trump tweeted out, looks like a third-rate grandstander named Representative Thomas Massie, a congressman, and he tags him. A congressman from, unfortunately, a truly great state, Kentucky, wants to vote against the new Save Our Workers bill in Congress. He just wants the publicity. He can stop it. He can't stop it, only delay, which is both dangerous. So I find this a disgusting tweet here. Yeah. Anyway, so it was funny though. He bit back in that little interview on the street there, and she says, "Well, the president called you a third-rate grandstander." He's like, "I'm at least second-rate." So I thought that was a pretty
the very stable genius. The task force, including Mike Pence, but certainly including Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci and the head of the CDC and all that, they're on top of things. The VSG, the very stable genius, would do well to just not even be in the room when they're doing their briefings.
Yeah, and Massie was saying
it's irrelevant to what's going on.
And
he's got nothing to contribute but insults.
And they were saying that, like, you're endangering the other people of Congress by forcing them to come in here and vote. And he's saying they're endangering people every day, saying that all of these people who have these critical jobs have to be on the front lines. They have to be serving. They have to be doing their duty. Medical professionals, the grocery store baggers, the truckers, everybody has to be running the backbone of the country.
They're the true heroes of this whole thing.
He's like, you people have the best health care of anyone in the country. Right? Get in here and do your damn job. And I don't disagree with him a bit. Now, some of them are in the danger zone. Maybe some have health problems. Some of them are in the age group that puts them. Certainly there are 200 of the 435 members of the House are below 60, right? I hope.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's go to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And I gotta say, I get why people like this woman. People on the right.
She's as much of a socialist as Bernie.
I agree.
Yeah.
Or worse even.
Yeah. Right.
Bernie Sanders is a pretend socialist.
Yeah.
This woman,
I think she's the real deal. Yeah.
This woman, she probably has a Che Guevara shrine in her apartment somewhere. But. Well, let's just listen to her. She goes off on a nice little tangent here.
I represent one of the hardest hit communities in the hardest hit city in this country, Queens, New York. 13 dead in a night in Elmhurst Hospital alone. Our community's reality is this country's future if we don't do anything. Hospital workers do not have protective equipment. We don't have the necessary ventilators, but we have to go into this vote eyes wide open. What did the Senate majority fight for? One of the largest corporate bailouts with as few strings as possible in American history. Shameful. The greed of that fight is wrong for crumbs, for our families. And the option that we have is to either let them suffer with nothing or to allow this greed and billions of dollars, which will be leveraged into trillions of dollars, to contribute to the largest income inequality gap in our future. There should be shame about what was fought for in this bill and the choices that we have to make.
Gentlelady's time's expired.
And I yield.
Yeah. And, a couple of things. One, us conservatives, and I think libertarians too, often make a distinction between being pro-business and pro-free market. And there is a difference.
I think there's a huge difference.
Up at the top of the pyramid of types and sizes of businesses in America are these huge corporations that often, because they're up to their eyeballs in government contracts and things like that, and lobbying the legislature for one thing and another, and all this talk of partnership, public-private partnership and all this stuff, that they operate differently than people way down their supply chains or mom and pop type businesses or anything like that.
Right.
And you can kind of see her point.
I see her point.
Clearly. During the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, when the government sort of nationalized General Motors. Of course, now everybody's talking about how Trump pulled the 1950 Defense Production Act in order to make GM convert one of its plants to making ventilators. The table was kind of set for that. GM, you could make the argument it hasn't been a fully private corporation since 2009 when we infused it with tax dollars. And that gets a little close to what we call fascism.
Right, yeah.
The technical definition of fascism is government control of corporations.
I agree. I mean, I don't want to be a subject to a corporatocracy any more than I want to be a subject to any state.
F. Buckley had a quote one time that said, any large power center I refuse to acquiesce to, whether it be, I think he meant, whether it be General Motors or the federal government or,
Right. And so we talk about like the implications of this situation. This pandemic is going to be just a wood chipper for small businesses. I mean, the restaurants, the mom and pop shops, that are going to go under because of this. I mean, it's just staggering. And the amount of bailout is not going to help them very much. Right. It might squeak a few of them by, but there's going to be a lot of places that close their doors permanently because of this. There's going to be people who are going to lose their entire livelihoods because they're not allowed to serve the public. They might be able to serve them carry out, which I think is crazy because if you're going to get sick from a restaurant, you're probably going to get it from the cook or from your waiter. I think there's going to be lasting implications about this. And Ocasio-Cortez is saying, you guys are so quick to bail out Boeing. You're so quick to infuse Lockheed Martin and Raytheon with money. You have no problem putting this giant stake in General Motors, who have made crap products for going on 40 years. You know what I mean? And have the worst quality standards. They can't stand on their own. You have no problem propping them up, but mom and pop restaurant diner people, they're going to tank, and she's not wrong.
Yeah, on Twitter, conservatives, there's a certain type of conservatives had a field day with it because she looks like a 9-year-old having a hissy fit. But
yeah, she keeps stamping her feet.
But
it's very
the
funny.
visuals of it can lend themselves to that. But you're right. All three of these Senate/House floor diatribes we've been talking about, you can look at them a couple of ways, and there's some validity to what what's being said if you look at it a certain way. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so we spent a lot of time on the caring versus grandstanding
Okay.
segment.
Segment 2. Someday maybe we'll try a free market. This is a segment we do quite often. And man, this is a very pertinent one. Do you know how much of the crud that Pelosi and et al. Were trying to stuff into it actually made it into the final deal that was hammered out?
I'm having trouble finding out exactly what, but I thought we might at least go down the list.
Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts made it squeaked into the final deal.
Yeah, there's the performing arts.
Energy forms like solar and windmill and all that.
Let's go through what they wanted in the first place, and
let me brace myself. I know I'm going to get mad here. Yeah.
Okay, so this is from National Review. This was before they had the final version out. This is what the Democrats wanted to get in this, and you might add if you know what the Republicans tried to stuff in it, because I'm not trying to make the claim that the Democrats are the only ones trying to stuff pork.
Oh no, and on that note, just let me, of course, the corporate bill, and to ameliorate that, the Republicans in the final negotiations proposed, well, let's set up an inspector general to make sure that it's not doesn't just turn into a slush fund for corporations. Trump now wants to do away with that inspector general provision.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, back. Let's go back to the Democrat side. Yeah.
Okay. So they try to put in diversity initiatives.
Make sure you got the right demographic balance on a corporate board and all that crud.
Yeah, so Pelosi's bill would, this is from National Review, I'm quoting, Pelosi's bill would expand Section 308 to cover banks and financial institutions in which at least half of outstanding shares are held by one or more women or whose board of directors are majority female, given that women make up the statistical majority of the American population. It is strange that House Democrats would seek to expand a law designed to support minority depository institutions to include them. Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's see. They had a restructuring corporate boards. Again, I'm quoting from National Review. All companies that receive federal aid related to COVID-19 would be required under the House proposal to appoint at least 1/3 of their board members through a one employee, one vote election process. In other words, if companies accept aid from the federal government at a moment when, because of completely unforeseeable global catastrophe, demand has cratered in response to a lethal pandemic, the House bill would force them to completely upend their boards of directors to no conceivable end other than the fulfillment of a long-standing progressive wish. So what I don't understand is if they get government money, well, government doesn't have any money. The government only has our money, so why don't I get the vote about what they do versus and I'm not proposing that's what should happen, because I think that's a dangerous situation, having the public vote on how a corporation behaves. But to have the people inside the organization, I mean, they can vote with their feet, but to insist that they have a democracy within their company seems like it's going to just hose a lot of companies.
Yeah. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, wasn't there something in there for them?
There was. I don't see it on this list here.
Okay.
There was some immigration stuff.
Okay.
Let's see. In a portion of the bill addressing the contingency protocols for the administration of the 2020 U.S. Census, the House bill includes a section on institutions of higher learning. The bill prescribes colleges and universities from disclosing any information to the Bureau on the immigration or citizenship status of any individual enrolled there. And they had environmental regulations. Transportation Secretary would be given the power to disperse grant monies based upon the potential greenhouse gases emitted from an applicant's project and the potential the project has in reducing United States greenhouse gas emissions associated with air travel. I mean, just like, what the hell is this? And there's 75
memo to the Democrats. Is this an urgent situation or not? I mean, is that not stuff we can argue about next year or some damn time? $75
million to support public broadcasting.
Yeah.
$25 million in extra salaries and expense money for the House of Representatives. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been told that we have a shortage of ventilators, we have a shortage of respiratory gear, we have a shortage of what they call PPE, the personal protection equipment. So where's that shit in this bill? Who's mandating a buy from a foreign entity or a production increase or whatever? And on the right, they want to support all these corporations. Well, Elon Musk. Excuse me. Elon Musk said that they were going to convert their production lines over to creating ventilators. So I mean, he's already getting a lot of public money, but like, why not support that effort? If you're going to support an effort to produce what we need right now with public money, why not support that effort? Why not every other one of these companies that wants to retool, General Motors even, that wants to retool to create ventilators, to create PPE that's not at acceptable volume levels now? Where's that money?
Yeah, not to mention the enormous logistical implications. You can't use the same manufacturing engineers and manufacturing processes that you do to make cars or whatever, to make ventilators. You got to go get people from that field and bring them into your plant. And yeah.
Someone had made a good point, and I wish I had. I wish I knew who it was to give them credit, but they had made the point that the ventilator situation requires an operator, and that operator is not just somebody that can go to the hospital and fill out an application to get the job. That's a certification that they have to have. That's a legal accreditation that they have to have. So is there a shortage of ventilator operators? There would be. If we get all these other ventilators in, there's going to be a shortage of ventilator operators. So how do we address that problem? I don't hear anybody talking about that, except for people.
Isn't that something that would require our legislators' attention far more than the demographic makeup of a corporate board or
Or $75 million for PBS, for Christ's sakes.
I know. Yeah.
Even if you like PBS, how is this possibly the time to do that?
Yeah.
How is it possibly good expenditure of resources to do that? And that's one of the ones that got in. So that's in the final bill.
Yeah. Hey, how are we doing on time? I'm kind of, aren't we in about 40 minutes in? I think?
We're getting into a pinch on it. I don't know that there's anything left to beat on that one.
Okay. Segment 3, meanwhile, back in Athens, we'll start with talking about e-learning days in our local school system and branch out to talk about education more broadly, because there's one hopeful possibility coming out of this. And then we'll tie it all up with our relationship. Anyway, you're the parent who's having personal experience with this. Go ahead.
Okay, so we have there's a possibility for e-learning, right? So just like working from home, it's schooling from home. So
I'm an adjunct faculty member at our local community college, and I'm going to finish out the semester completely online.
Yeah. I'm surprised your classes aren't offered online, at least in addition
when I
to
teach jazz history in the fall, it's completely online.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But in the spring, when I teach rock history, we meet in a classroom once a week, or we did. Yeah.
Your life is so awesome. That's so cool. You teach like music history, rock history, jazz history. Like that's I'm so jelly. So anyway, so they have this opportunity to do school from home. And I'll just make the point that this is what a lot of homeschoolers do these days, right? So their kids get on these different websites and they have a curriculum. It's a guided curriculum that's approved, by the state. So they can take these classes and they're at least up to par with what the education standards are set by the state.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I agree with that. That's just the way it is. So we've had the ability to do e-learning days all along. So we had snow days and other things like that 2-hour delays and whatever. And you should be able to do e-learning during those days, right?
That's my understanding.
But they do everything through a Chromebook, right? So a Chromebook, if you don't know, is just a little laptop that runs Google Chrome OS. It's sort of like an Android, but a little bit more like Windows or Mac OS. It's a little expanded version of Android operating system.
Okay.
and they run certain apps and websites that you can do whatever on, play games or, serious work, whatever. But for the school, they've got like a VPN, and they've got all of their stuff connected for the student through that Chromebook. So they have their logins, they have their username and passwords, they have all of their bookmarks and settings on that machine. So in order for them to do the learning days at home, they kind of have to have that machine.
Yeah.
So they sent the machines home a couple of times through the year to practice e-learning days. Okay? Which were successful-ish, I guess. It worked.
Yeah.
But the problem is that they don't send the Chromebook home with the kids every day. And especially they should send the Chromebooks home with the kids every day during the winter time, right? When we're expecting snow days. Because if we get a snow day, if they don't have the Chromebook at home, they can't do the e-learning. So by the time it hit, this emergency hit, and literally every person in the school district, in the county school corporation, of course everyone in the country probably is at home e-learning, but in our county school corporation, when the COVID-19 shutdown happened, every single kid is on e-learning, and the system crashes, right? It's just overloaded, which is understandable. A lot of companies are experiencing that situation right now too. But if we had already had those during snow days, we would have known what capacity it needed, because on a snow day, the entire school corporation,
we'd have some experience with this.
Is going. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe it's everybody in the state is on it, or broader than that. But like they had tried these practice runs, but then they didn't actually have any good historical data to show that we can do this on a large scale when the whole county is at home. Yeah. And so it's just parents on Facebook and other social media have just been, I can't get on. I won't say the specific tools that they're using, but I can't get on this. I can't get on that. This thing's down. So I think are you still there, Barney? I lost your video feed.
Yeah. Somebody was trying to call me.
Okay. So what's interesting, and I'll quit rambling and turn this over to you here in a second, but what's really interesting is watching my wife handle this. As I've been working from home, and we had some plumbing problems that I've been dealing with here at the house. As I've been dealing with those things, she's been fully homeschooling our two kids, and essentially our niece also, who comes here almost every single day. And so she was really apprehensive before about homeschooling. We talked about it for years. We'd like to do some more traveling. We'd like to be a little more free. So we talked about homeschooling. But we were both really intimidated by the prospect because, we're already feeling overwhelmed. But she's essentially been doing it for the last 2 weeks. So now
Which might be a silver lining of all this.
I think so.
Enough people, a larger number of people that, hey, this homeschooling thing really has some merits, which loosens the grip of the public school teachers union monopoly on all this. And we look at more, we look at a wider array of models as ways to educate the youth of our country. And
and give people more confidence in doing the thing.
Yeah, choice. Perhaps we can introduce more choice.
Yeah.
Which, okay, is it about time to wrap everything up?
Let's go down one more little rabbit hole. We're at 44 minutes now, so we got a little time.
Oh, okay. All right.
But I think that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as how society is going to change from this. For one, have you ever seen almost the entire U.S. economy stopped in its tracks?
Well, that's what I meant by wrap it up.
4 weeks on end.
The relationship between the individual and the state.
Yeah.
We always we have some experience with this. The Great Depression, which I think I've discussed with you, haven't I? The book, The Forgotten Man by Amity Shlaes.
It's not ringing a bell. You may have, but
okay. She's a columnist with Forbes, and she's a scholar at some think tank, I forget which. She used to write for the Wall Street Journal, and she wrote about 10 or 11 years ago took a fresh look at the Great Depression and went through the people who came to be part of FDR's inner circle, his brain trust. People like Frances Perkins, who was the lady who, the architect of the minimum wage and Social Security, or Rexford Tugwell, and some of these people that were the architects of the New Deal. And it's a fascinating book. She gets into their person and people like how the table was set for it all by Herbert Hoover's incompetence when the stock market crashed and the Depression first got started.
Yeah.
And her, I won't get too far into it, but her overall point was that the New Deal did not heal us from the Great Depression.
Yeah.
We wound up, we kind of had relapses of it throughout the 1930s, and quite frankly, World War II and gearing up for wartime production was what pulled our fat out of the fire.
I believe there was a book called America's Great Depression. I think that was a Rothbard book, if I'm not mistaken, where he basically made the same claim that that at the time, I mean, gigantic tax increases. You think about excise taxes especially, so taxes on products. I mean, if you want to look at the Great Depression and talk about FDR, did FDR cure the Great Depression, or did he exacerbate it? And if you just think about at a time when people were poorer than ever, making stuff more expensive could not possibly heal the plight of the common person.
Precisely. And so many programs that were supposed to be short-term fixes for emergencies that came along as part of the Great Depression. The Farm Bill of 1933, the WPA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, a number of these things that wound up existing in perpetuity.
Just like we talked about in the first segment with Bernie saying, "Oh my gosh, for 4 months, somebody's going to get $600 extra." But like, that's permanent. There's no way it's going back.
You bet. And Trump invoking the Defense Production Act. He's sounding very authoritarian lately, and which gives the relationship between the state and the individual. I'm a big Madisonian, as we've talked about before. James Madison, the principal architect of the Constitution. I just think he was one of if any of our founders were indispensable, it's him. And government must be kept to a bare minimum. We need to decide how much government do we need to keep ourselves safe and enforce contracts and you start expanding it beyond that, and there's no shrinking it again.
I've got something for you. Okay. So we talked about how the world is forever changed, right? Yeah. Homeschooling is now more attractive and more approachable to millions more people than ever before. For an example. In another example, there's a danger, like you were talking about, in the Depression and government programs that become permanent. There's a real risk of us steering the boat too hard, right?
Yes.
Back the other way. But here's something that I find really interesting about the situation in the medical field. A lot of the regulations are getting removed. Restrictions are getting cut, and a lot more freedom is being exercised in the medical field. Yeah. Doctors are allowed to practice across state lines in an emergency situation like this, so they can do consulting across in another state or whatever. They're having people do things that they're not necessarily approved for. I heard somebody state that the ventilator situation, the pumps had enough power to power actually 9 ventilators. So you can turn one into 9 just by adding hoses and superficial things like that. So I think that there's a real chance that we'll see that a whole lot of these medical regulations are just crap in the way of us being able to deliver good products and services to people. When AOC talks about the hospitals don't have enough this, there aren't enough hospital beds. Well, a lot of that's because, like we talked about in a previous show, the government decides where you can put a hospital and where you can't, when you can compete in the medical field and when you can't. And there would be more hospitals if that wasn't the case. But there's a local health professional, and I'm not gonna mention the name of this person. I'm just gonna read what they posted on social media. But they put a picture of a mask, and it says, "This is my N95 mask that I used for 8 consecutive days while covering the ICU and taking care of mechanically ventilated patients with confirmed suspected COVID-19 pneumonia and ARDS. We also moved the IV pumps and ventilator controls out of the rooms to save the PPE, the personal protection equipment, as supply gets limited nationwide. Last month, JCAHO and CMS would have had heart attacks on seeing this. Today, they have nothing to say as the system finally realized that most of the regulations and unnecessary documentation has nothing to do with the clinical outcomes and only make our healthcare inefficient and cause disruption in good quality patient care."
Yeah.
I mean, that's out of the horse's mouth right there. That's your medical professionals talking about the unnecessary amount of stuff that they have to do to comply with regulations that gets in the way of providing care. And now they seem to be, they seem to be okay if they dispense with those formalities.
Yeah.
While they deal with real stuff.
Yeah. So there are, while there's a danger of even an expanded state, there are also some potential silver linings in this. People starting to say, hey, we could actually be more free in the area of education or healthcare or things like that. And,
yep.
Yeah.
And I think it's really cool to watch people pitching in. Like, I have seen a lot of people actually doing stuff. My wife and some other people had a whole bunch of their equipment for their sewing, and my wife is a trained seamstress, so she was sewing masks. Somebody from a local fabric store donated a whole bunch of elastic for the bands, completely free for anyone who was going to sew masks. And other people were shopping for other people who couldn't, or just pitching in and helping out. And I think that really shows that we can be a volunteer society when we're called to be.
Oh yeah, Alexis de Tocqueville might really be heartened by the community spirit that Americans have shown in the wake of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how are we doing here, time-wise?
I think we are about at time. We got a little time left, but
well, listen, I'd like to tell the viewers I have 2 main venues where for opinion writing. One is a blog where I put more of my link-rich stuff and that kind of thing. It's called Late in the Day, and I kind of tapered off once the great upheaval happened, but I'm going to get back to being more regular about posting there. I generally, over the years, have posted at least daily, sometimes more than that. The other is a Substack newsletter I write. Once, twice a week I do there. It's called Precipice, and I've got a fresh piece at Precipice up, and I've shared it on the Barney and Clyde Facebook page. It's called, I just wrote it and posted it today. The experts and first responders are worthy of our admiration. Our leaders, not so much.
Yeah, that was a great piece.
Yeah. Thank you. And also, yesterday, I posted on my regular Facebook page a video of me on my gorgeous Gretsch archtop doing a solo rendition of Duke Ellington's I Guess I'm Just a Lucky So-and-So. And I decided, let's share that on BNC, on the BNC page too. So
okay.
Up there as well.
Maybe I'll put it at the end of this too.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
Well, listen, we do this generally fortnightly and forthrightly. Due to the great upheaval, we skipped a week, but it looks like this worked out well. So we'll be able to get back to a regular rhythm, if you will, of these podcasts. So
yeah, I'm glad we got to do this because I was getting kind of low on my, I don't know, this kind of pumps me up after we have a good chat and all that stuff. So I've been missing
Right.
doing the podcast. So I'm glad we got to do this.
Yeah. And so check in and see if we're doing this fortnightly and forthrightly. And in whenever we meet again, in the meantime, stay vigilant about your freedom.
Well, that's an interesting development.